Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and welcome back to my creative space. Today's reading vlog, I wanted to cover my Libby and Hoopla holds and try to read down all the things that I checked out and that I've gotten from my library. The list of books that I have out are Ring Shout by Djèlí Clark, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and lastly, Women Eating by Kohda. I actually started this vlog the other day and then accidentally deleted my original introduction to this video, so I have already started and completed Ring Shout, so I'll let you go to the past and hear my thoughts and opinions about the beginning of Ring Shout, and we'll come back to present time for me to wrap up my thoughts and opinions of that.
Recorded Books presents Ring Shout, or Hunting Ku Kluxes in the End Times by Djèlí Clark, narrated by Cheney Waits. Notation 15. Interview with Uncle Will, age 67, transliterated from the Gullah by Emma Krause. Hereafter, E.K. There's a shout we do about old Pharaoh and Moses. The Lord part the Red Sea and all his people run through. Old Pharaoh thinking to follow, but when he do, them waters fall in on him. So we say, Pharaoh's host got lost, and shout about all the fussing and crying he must have done to see it. I was a boy when Union soldiers come tell us about the Jubilee. Always imagined them blue uniforms was like the waters falling in on old Pharaoh. Cause Wicked Massa and Missus, them sure enough did some wailing and fussing to see us go.
Alright, so I started reading the audiobook for Ring Shout, and I read 2 chapters, so I'm about 20% into the novella. So basically what the Ku Klux are these monsters that this group of resistant fighters are hunting down. They're these monsters that kind of take over the bodies of humans, and the way that they come about is the festering of hate within humans, and as the hate grows within them, they start to morph into Ku Klux monsters. I think the idea of hate breeding like actual physical monsters is interesting. It kind of reminds me of the plot point of Jujutsu Kaisen, where like the kind of curse monsters that the sorcerers are fighting come about because of negative emotions of people in the area, and like these curses start to pop up around like hospitals, schools, and things like that. Whereas with the Ku Klux monsters, they come about with the like residual seeds of hate within white folk, and they then manifest into monsters. At this point in the novella, they're finding out that these monsters that they've been hunting and kind of have a better grasp of are evolving, and this group of resistance fighters are kind of like, what the hell do we do with that kind of information, and like how are we supposed to fight these monsters that we've slowly have started to gotten a handle on and are able to deal with. And of course their goal is to eradicate the Ku Klux monsters, as well as bringing about equality in the world that they live in. The issue at hand right now seems very large, in my opinion. So I am interested to see how the author tackles kind of closing up this novella, or if maybe it's open-ended. I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to continue reading. Thus far, I'm having an enjoyable experience because the narration is just so lively and immersive, but I will update you once I finish this novella. So with Ring Shout, I completed it the same day that I had started it. It was quite a quick novella read, and I will say my thoughts and opinions of it pretty much stayed the same. It was quite a vivid world that Djèlí Clark was able to create within such a short amount of time, and I think the character motivations and everything were very well realized. There was a lot of motion and intensity in this novella, and I will say there's quite a bit of body gore in this one, so if that's something you're a little bit queasy about, keep that in mind, because there was a scene that our main character was in that had quite an intense body gore and the description of it, I was like, wow, okay. But it was described very well. Like, obviously, for it to be so visceral, P. Djèlí Clark's writing is indicative of creating such atmosphere and well-detailed experience. There are sections that the author does set up that makes it feel a little open-ended. The main plot, again, was very closed off and like tied up, and it made a lot of sense, but there are little threads and inklings that I think if P. Djèlí Clark wanted to revisit this world, they can definitely write another novella, but I don't think P. Djèlí Clark has any plans to write further in the Ring Shout universe. I know that the author has quite a few other things, and because I enjoyed the writing and description of this novella, I'm really interested in trying out more from P. Djèlí Clark. The next book that I have and that I've already started is Women Eating, and this one feels more of a literary horror. There aren't any elements thus far that I feel is horrifying. It feels much more of a coming of age, and so this one, we are following this young woman, Lydia, and she's not necessarily a woman, she's half vampire, half human. And so at the beginning, we're introduced to her where she's moving to a new completely part of London, and she's trying to get her footing in this area and finally introduce herself into adulthood without the assistance of her mother. Her mother is in a care assistance home, and she is moving up in a place further from where her mother is, and she's just navigating life, loneliness, and it's one of those books that feels like a very deep character study, and the main character, she is contemplating what parts of her is actually humanity that she inherited from her father, and what parts of her is this demonic vampire creature that she inherited from her mother. The narrator does such a good job at setting the scene and bringing emotion to how she is narrating the novel, and the narrator's voice is so soft and soothing in a way, but it feels at moments a little blasé and a little like I am kind of detached from my experience, and I think that adds a lot to what I am reading currently. I'm really enjoying it. There are moments that I've had to take pause and be like, I really like the way the author wrote that section. Yeah, thus far, nothing too intense on the elements of horror, but I am interested in seeing further how the story with our main character goes, and if there is a resolve in her relationship with her mother or a resolve with her relationship with herself. All of that will be figured out once I continue reading. I think I'm going to reorganize my bookshelves today. I feel like it's time. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm really not sure, but we'll see how it goes. Today is an intense cleaning day, so I think I'll get a good amount read. Okay, so I am 40% into Women Eating, and I don't know if I said in the introduction, but our main character Lydia is actually not only half human, half vampire, but she's also half Malaysian, half Japanese. So we are dealing with not only her being this solo woman on her own in the city, but we're also dealing with her ethnic background and how that impacts her experience around the London area she lives in. And she's at the point that I'm at, she's at the care facility that her mom is at, and she basically runs into this resident who spews like very racist things at her, and she is viscerally uncomfortable, and she's just like, what's going on here? You know, I'm just here to visit my mother. And when she goes into her mom's room, she makes note about how the care facility makes it so British and her mother is Malaysian. And so she's like, how can she connect with herself if basically her entire identity is wiped out and she's in this place that is that has no touch of what her mother is and was. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this section where we are more so speaking on her identity and how she feels living in a predominantly white area and like what that reflects under her, not only with her being a woman, with her being an Asian woman, and then on top of that, her not even being fully human and her already questioning that. It's a very interesting read. I've got half of the things that I need done, and I'm almost ready to tackle my bookshelf. So I will give you further updates. Hopefully in the next update, I will be finished with Women Eating. If not, I'll have started organizing my bookshelves. Okay, so I did some reshuffling of my bookshelves, and it's not too different, but basically what I did is I kept my YAs in the corner over here, and then I have some of my fantasy, kind of sci-fi fantasy here, and I organized it by author's last name. And then this was more of like a color scheme, so white and black. And then here is all my other random books by author's last name, my Robin Hobb books, my fantasy romance books, and then I did author's last name for my contemporary romances, and then I have just a few like YA romance leaning series right there. And then over here is very random. I have some of my horror reads, my classics right there, and then some special editions that I have. I put all over together because I just didn't know where else to put it. To be honest, I'm not sure if I like it, but this is what I'm working with right now. The thing is that fantasy books are all so dark, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it aesthetically because I don't have that many books where I find it hard to locate them. Like, I know I have a pretty good general sense of where my books are, so putting them in like author last name to find them easier isn't really necessary for me. My bookshelves mostly are organized in a way that I think is aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, this could change, honestly. I don't know if I'm fully happy with it, but I also was kind of bored with what I had prior. So we'll see. If it changes, I'll show you. Because before I had like a rainbow shelf down here and then like a black and red theme up here beside my Robin Hobb, and all my romance books were rainbowed. Yeah. Honestly, now that I look at it, I kind of hate it, but whatever. I'll let it sit here, and if the mood strikes me, I can do a complete reshuffle later on.
Harper Via and Harper Audio present Woman Eating, a novel by Claire Kohda, read by Jane Louis. For BC and T, for us. From Lafcadio Hearn, Oleolation in Ghostly Japan. All life, to sustain itself, must devour life. Part 1. Chapter 1. The guy from Cora is standing outside the building in the sun. I've read online that this place used to be a biscuit factory. Hey, the guy calls. He waves. I feel self-conscious walking these last few meters, since he has seen me now, and so is just watching me approach.
Alright, so yesterday I didn't vlog, but today as I was coloring, I finished up Women Eating, and I think I had a really good time, and the production of the audio narration I think was done really well, and it really brought to life the voice of Lydia and just her struggle with herself as half human, half vampire, and also her trying to navigate adulthood, but also just her identity and who she is. There are elements at the end that get a little bit more horror leaning. Do keep in mind it is a vampire novel, so the sort of horror that is present is mostly her trying to find out how to find blood in order to sustain herself. And so, if that is something that might be an issue for you, do read triggers and all those things. There is an element of grief and just navigating a very toxic mother daughter relationship. But other than that, I had a good time. And I think if I had to rate it at this point, it'd be maybe like a 4.55 star. But I really want to think on it because it definitely is a more literary leaning novel. So I usually, with literary books, like to kind of sit and like let the story marinate in my mind a little bit. But that was a positive reading experience. I'm glad I finally picked it up. It's been on my TBR for a while, and hearing a bunch of my friends reading the book really pushed me to finally pick it up. And I'm glad that I did, and I'm also glad that I got to read it via audio. The next book I'm going to start is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. My Libby hold for the audiobook is actually due in like 3 days, so I really got to chop on it. With contemporary romances, I tend to read them pretty quickly on audio, probably like 2 times speed, a little bit more, and the audio at 1 time speed is 12 hours, so I definitely could knock it out in a day, but I do have some socializing that I have planned, so I definitely don't want to be reading while I'm hanging out with people, but other than that, those are my plans. I hope to at least get half of this book done today and maybe read the rest tonight when, all of my social plans are done and over with. Other than that, I'm gonna get going and I'll update you when I have some thoughts about Just for the Summer.
This book is for my wonderful readers and listeners. I started writing just for me. I never thought it would go anywhere or that anyone would see it. Now I write for you. It's way better with company. Dear listener, while my books are all rom-coms, some themes in this story may be triggering for some listeners. If you feel trigger warnings or spoilers and you don't need them, please skip the rest of this disclaimer and jump right into the book.
Reddit. Am I the Asshole? Posted by just_in_267.
So it's nighttime now, and I did start Just for the Summer. The premise of this book is that our main character Justin posts on Reddit, the Am I an Asshole kind of forum, and he says like one of his friends is dating his ex and now they're getting married, and now he picked like a really ugly dog from the shelter and then named the dog after his friend or whatever. And does that make him the asshole if he named his ugly dog, after his friend who like stole his girl, right? And then our heroine Emma, her friend shows her the forum post and is like, that's funny because this is the issue that you have as well. And why don't you go ahead and just message him and see what that's about? So they kind of hit it off on Reddit DMs, and they kind of strike a plan that they'll kind of date each other, and once they break up, then they'll find the love of their lives. I enjoy the 2 Abby Jimenez romances that I've read. Actually, I think I've read 3 because I read that short story she did for KU, and she does a really good job with building a very fun and flirty and bantery atmosphere between her 2 characters, and that is not lost on Just for the Summer. I know that people say that this book is a bit heavier than her other books that she's written thus far. We've gotten inklings and hints of the dynamic between Emma and her mother, but we for sure have been introduced to the plot of Justin's mother going to jail. We haven't gotten huge points in it. I think she committed some sort of accounting fraud, but we haven't deep dived into the parental issues that the both of them have. We've really been focusing on the DMs that they've sent each other back and forth, and they've developed into like calling each other, FaceTiming each other, things like that. And I have the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so I get these cute little drawings in some of the chapters. So this is like this billboard that Justin's like apartment is facing, And then there's this one at the end of the part that I just finished where it's like the house that Emma and her like friend are staying at, and I'm like, how cute and adorable is that? But all that to say, I'm 8 chapters, or I just paused before chapter 8, so the audiobook says like 20% into the book, and I'm enjoying the kind of banter and the relationship that's building between the two, and I'm just wondering how heavy these plot lines with their mothers will become, because I know with yours truly, the plot lines and the anxiety and the insecurities that each of our individual characters had did get really heavy towards the end. And I'm kind of hoping that this one strikes a better balance, because as much as I love yours truly and the anxiety representation being so well done, it did get really heavy at the end with our female main character and how she was handling the situation that she had in front of her. It got to be a lot at one point, so I'm hoping that this one balances that kind of struggle but also the romance better. So I have finished Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and that book was so emotional, especially towards the end, because the latter half of the book, we are diving a lot deeper into Emma's relationship with her mother. There are issues that we see between Justin and his mother, but the relationship between Emma and her mother is much more present and on page. And just getting to see how her relationship with her mother has impacted her relationship just with other people around her, I think was really well done. There is an author's note at the end where Abby Jimenez does say that she consulted a psychologist that specializes in PTSD. I appreciate that she took the time to speak with professionals and talk about how that representation is present in her book. But all in all, I think versus yours truly, I think that this book balances the emotional, hard-hitting moments and the romance a little bit more evenly. But this could be more of a recency bias because it's been almost a year since I've read yours truly, so do keep that in mind. But I would say if you're in the mood to read a more serious type of romance, and I think that's what most of what I've read from Abby Jimenez is like. The short story that I read from her did have serious tones. It had death of a loved one, and yours truly has anxiety representation. The main character going through a breakup with her, I think her ex cheated on her in yours truly. And I think out of the 4 things that I've read, Part of Your World is the lightest of the 4, and even then it has some heavier themes in there as well. For me, I kind of expect Abby Jimenez's stories to have a serious undertone with the characters' just personal life. And usually the way she sets up the romance brings a lot of levity and a lot of light to the story. And I feel like with Just for the Summer, it definitely was that. There were so many romantic moments between Emma and Justin, and they weren't these really huge moments of romance. They were very day-to-day, very soft, very warm moments that they shared that were so mundane. But I think that encapsulates their relationship so well, and I think all in all, it was a great read. I think I'm landing on like a 4.5, maybe 5. We'll see. Usually my ratings change after a week or so of me, sitting on my opinion. But with that, the next book I'm going to actually pick up is Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I'm going to go ahead and start the audiobook for that one. I heard that the elements of the audiobook are really dynamic. So I'm interested in reading the Good Girls Guide to Murder through audio because I know that there's like a heavier production. There's multiple people in the narration, I believe. And then there's also like elements of like making it sound like a phone call and things like that. I'm not entirely sure yet, obviously, because I have not started it. But yeah, that's going to be the book that I start next. And I will go ahead and let you go here. Probably make myself a matcha. And once I have some thoughts and opinions, I'll go ahead and update this vlog.
So, whatever happened to Andy Bell that night happened between 10:40 p.m. and 12:45 a.m. Here seems like a good place to type up the transcript from my interview with Angela Johnson. Transcript of interview with Angela Johnson from the Missing Persons Bureau.
Hello.
Hi, is this Angela Johnson?
Speaking, yep. Is this Pippa?
Yes, thanks so much for replying to my email. Do you mind if I record this interview for my project?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, I've only got about 10 minutes. So, what do you want to know about missing persons?
Well, I was wondering if you could talk me through what happens when someone is reported missing. What's the process and the first steps taken by the police?
When someone is reported missing, the police will try to get as much detail as possible so they can identify the potential risk to the missing person, and an appropriate police response can be made. They'll ask for name, age, description, the clothes they were last seen wearing, the circumstances of their disappearance, if going missing is out of character for this person, details of any vehicle involved. Using this information, the police will determine whether this is an at-risk missing persons case.
And what circumstances would make it an at-risk case?
If they are vulnerable because of their age or a disability, or if the behavior is out of character, which indicates they could have been exposed to harm.
I have started a Good Girls Guide to Murder, and I'm here to give you the synopsis of this book. So basically, we are following our main character, Pippa, who is a senior in high school, and she decides that for her senior capstone project, she is going to cover the murder of Andy Bell. And in this town, Andy Bell was presumed to be murdered by her boyfriend, Sal Singh, 5 years ago. And I think at the time Pippa was like 12 or something. And she just remembers Sal Singh being such a kind person. And she feels it very uncharacteristic the way he was just blamed for her murder so easily. And the investigation was not thorough in her mind. And so she decides that she's going to do this capstone project. She's going to look into what the police process was like and what the overall tone and narrative was like back when the investigation was happening. And so at the beginning, she's introducing her capstone project, and she kind of frames her project in a way where she's studying media and how the media has played into this investigation and overall murder. Her real motive is that she thinks Sal Singh is actually innocent, and she believes that he was just the easy person to blame because he was the boyfriend, and also he is a person of color. So at the point that I've read so far, there has been light topics of the race of Sal Singh and how Andy Bell is this all-American blonde beauty, and Sal Singh is Indian American, and how that plays such a big role in how the media kind of views him and how the treatment of his character was. In the case, he was obviously a suspect, and a few days later, he unalived himself. And so Pippa is trying to get people who were friends with the both of them, and just what the media was asking at that point, because she feels like Sal Singh's death also is suspicious. So she's really, at this point, looking in what she suspects double homicide. And I think, one, I'm enjoying my time because the audio production is done really well, and it's very engaging, and the way it's written is very quick pace. I believe this is YA, but I will say, as someone who's in their mid-20s, this is a little silly goofy seeing like this young high school girl like basically investigating a cold case murder, and she's just bopping around town asking people these questions. That's probably, I mean, would she get in trouble with the law? I don't really know the justice system that well, but you know, she's like calling people, asking them questions, like leading questions, and she's like, "Oh, this is just for my senior project, but like, how was Andy Bell's character? Like, what kind of girl was she like?" And she like call the police station, be like, "Oh, do you have records of this?" And like, she gets the records of things with like omission and stuff, but I just think it's so funny that she's like this 17-year-old girl who's like just getting all this information willy-nilly. But you know, when you're reading, sometimes you just have to suspend your belief, and at this point that's what I'm doing, because like, I'm just trying to have a fun time. I'm not trying to be critical and be so serious about it. But all that to say, I'm having a really good time, and I do like myself a murder mystery. I think having such a young main character kind of brings a bit of light to this, because it is quite a heavy topic. You know, there is the discussion of like racial motivation in how the media framed the murder of Andy Bell. There's obviously 2 deaths of young people in here, so it's quite heavy topics that are covered in here. But the way Holly Jackson writes it, there is some levity with Pip's character being so young and having this emotional resilience that doesn't make this too depressing. But anyway, I'm very interested to know, because at the point that I'm reading, there are a lot of suspects that we have going on. I think I'm 30% in. Yeah, so there's like quite a good suspect list. And at this point, I'm like, Pip, you could tell me it's anybody and I would believe you, because the evidence that she has on certain people, I'm like, yeah, you're suspicious, you're suspicious. All of you could have done it together, really. I don't know, but I will leave it at that. I will go do the things that I'm responsible for, and I will check in when I have any other updates about Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I have finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I'm very pleasantly surprised with my experience with the book. I think that the audiobook narration definitely elevated my experience 100-fold, and I just like the mixed media elements that were in this. I think that this year I've been really dabbling into murder mystery, and I don't know, it just really, really worked for me. And I don't think that it being YA took away the seriousness and the tone of it. I think just having a younger protagonist definitely allowed for there to be a bit more light. And some of the very serious moments, I think I knew weren't going to be that intense because of the fact that it is YA, or that was just my assumption. And so I think having that serious tone, but it being in a YA mystery, made me feel more enjoyment and less stress when I was reading that. So I think that's the most that I will say. I don't want to speak too in depth because I don't want to spoil any of the plot points in this book, but I had such an enjoyable time, and I can't wait to see what the next book is. I think the next book, we followed like a different type of crime. I don't know if it's a murder per se, but like, I think the next book follows a completely different case, and I'm just interested in seeing how Holly Jackson takes our main character and moves the plot along. And hopefully it isn't a book that has like a slump in plot, if that makes sense. But I've read quite a few books this week, and I'm very happy that I got to clear out my Libby holds and send them back to my library. But I read Ring Shout by P. Djèlí Clark, Women Eating by Claire Kohda, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. all of them I had a great and positive experience for. I unfortunately didn't end up with a 5-star, but I still had pretty high ratings for all of the books that I read this week, and I had such an enjoyable time despite some of these reads being quite emotional for me. But all in all, great time reading. I love when I'm invested in stories, and I think every single one of the books that I've read had me invested in different ways. But yeah, with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you again for watching. But if you made it this far and have nothing to say, let's leave the pin emoji for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And if you have anything else you'd like to chat about in the comments, I'd love to respond to you in the comments below. Thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!